Two words: New Orleans. The Big Easy, the Crescent City, the birthplace of jazz. These are all nicknames for this historical city. But there's one name that may be what people call it most: home. Home is not necessarily the place where one might live. It is the place in which they feel happiest and most welcome. And that place for most of the people living in New Orleans is the city itself. But why is that so? New Orleans is one of the most unique cities in the world. From the music to the architecture to its historical background, there is no other city like it. Nevertheless, perhaps the one thing that truly makes us unique is our food. New Orleans cuisine is not strictly American or Spanish or anything for that matter. It is strictly New Orleanian. A mixture of several cultures, our food is anything but average. Traditional New Orleans cuisine is a mixture of Cajun, but mostly Creole foods, which are both the result of several cultures combining together to create one unique flavor. One of the major contributors to this mix is French cuisine. Along with those of several other cultures, French cuisine was very influential to the history and development of the food now found in New Orleans, not only in the various dishes that it brought, but also in the sauces and cooking techniques that came with it. Without these methods, our food would have never been able to develop and become what we today call traditional New Orleans cuisine.
Traditional New Orleans cuisine, in my opinion, you're going to hear everybody tell you it's a melting pot of all cuisines around the world. It's true. We're not an American city by definition. We have plenty of French and Spanish influence, and that's kind of where we pull all of our cuisine.
While we look at New Orleans cuisine, while it has a strong foundation in French and Caribbean and African, absolutely, Italian, people that came here and settled this area, they were so taken aback by all the natural resources we have.
So you got all of these different cuisines and cultures influencing the style of cooking and food, but you had the products from here that were so abundant. I would say Creole cuisine is really the traditional cuisine of New Orleans, but I think that still could be considered traditional New Orleans cuisine because of the abundance of French that were here.
200 years ago, sauces were designed to cover the flavor of the potentially gamey flavor of food. And so what they did was they brought over these highly developed French chefs, sauciers, to create these sauces that would make their food taste great. There are 5 other sauces, and so all the sauces that you have Creole, Espanol, Velouté, Hollandaise, and Bechamel. So those are 5 others, and everything else is a derivative of those type sauces. And so you just see these derivatives. You should say, so you have these 5. You say, well, if I take this one and this one, or this one, a little bit of this one, and so you start to see all these different variations that come out of these things. It's just really good.
From the late 80s on back, they used to say that New Orleans was a city of 500 restaurants and 50 recipes because there was a lot of duplication.
Prudhomme and Emerald changed that. Before Prudhomme worked at Commander's, there was no Cajun food on the menu or in New Orleans in general. He transformed the cuisine and also mentored many of the famous chefs today who went on to own their own restaurants, infusing what Prudhomme taught them. As executive chef at Commander's, Emerald also switched it up, incorporating Portuguese with Creole and Cajun to make his own style of cooking, but still maintaining many of the traditional dishes. He also learned about cooking at Commander's as demonstrated in a quote by Ella Brennan, which shows how she changed Emerald. She says, "We got Emerald when he was 25. He was very talented, but we also Creolized him. Today, Emerald still uses Creole in his cooking. The relationship between current-day chefs and traditional restaurants is a give and take. The chefs learn about cooking, and the restaurants learn ways to modernize their cooking to fit the times. The traditional restaurants provide the chefs with the skills needed to be able to open their own restaurants."
What Katrina has done is it sort of pressed the reset button for a lot of businesses in town, not just restaurants, but other places too. We're just now really getting back on our feet now. We were able to sustain ourselves and do okay, and now I can say that things are going really well. We found that what people wanted more than anything after Katrina was they wanted familiarity, they wanted comfort. The more they felt comfortable, and the more they felt, you know, hey, this is starting to feel more like New Orleans.
I think that the restaurant industry then was very vibrant and successful and growing, and you know, I think that the restaurant industry today is vibrant and growing as well. In 2004, there were about 800 restaurants in the city, and they, you know, were doing well. Today, there are over 1,200 restaurants in the city. It's somewhat hard to believe, considering there's 100,000 less people in the greater metropolitan area, and our visitors aren't quite back to where we were in 2004, but we're getting close.
Numbers-wise, pre-Katrina, every restaurant in the city was doing fantastic, especially the French Quarter. I'd say post-Katrina, up until about 2 years ago, it was a struggle, I'd say, for a lot of the restaurants. Now, you're pretty much at pre-Katrina numbers. Post-Katrina menu items changing, I think that comes with changing chefs. And now, post-Katrina, I'd say we're back to mainly Creole French.
You had to fight to get back to New Orleans. You had to want to get back to New Orleans. And so the spirit of those people that fought that battle, that came back to New Orleans to rebuild this city, is a totally different person than was here before the storm. People that are here now didn't find themselves here because grandma moved here. They found themselves here because they wanted to be here, because they fought to be here, because they believed that this is the place to be. There's a life, a phoenix concept, you know, of New Orleans, and it's probably better now. Our industry is healthier now than it was before the storm.
We're lucky enough we operate in markets in the West and Las Vegas and have a lot of connections in the Pacific seafood industry, as well as we operate restaurants in Florida. So we have a very broad network of distributors. I never once had a single worry about what we were serving. The prices did go up. We did our darndest to not pass that cost along to the customer, but things moved along for us, and we were able to keep business going as usual. Through careful purchasing and really working closely with our suppliers, we didn't really have any issues with any quality, loss of quality.
BP was different. BP was the water itself had the problem, and so there was a tremendous shortage of oysters because oysters can't swim. It was the most tested product in the world, was the Gulf seafood. So we're constantly going through testing it. We used a lot of it. Instead of using some of the fish that were short, we converted to another fish. So we found some pompano, flounder, other some ground fish as opposed to a drum. The drum went really high, and then sometimes you just, excuse me French, but it sucked it up and said, okay, we're just going to eat the loss.
I think the biggest challenge with the BP oil spill wasn't anything to do with the quality of the seafood. The biggest challenge we had because of the BP oil spill was that there weren't as many fishermen out there harvesting what was in the water. We continued to test and test and test, and all recorded tests came back with a rating of pristine. Pricing is something that's very sensitive to us because the consumer always looks at that. But at the end of the day, we had to look at where we were and what our margins were, and we still have to operate a business.
I think the BP oil spill affected people's trust, mainly. We were getting a lot of phone calls on where your shrimp from, where your oysters from, where your fish from. Is it safe to eat? You know, am I going to have cancer after I eat your seafood? Safe to say we probably have the strongest tested seafood industry there is now. So for a little while we did have to order from different coasts. People's trust is definitely back. You do have to make concessions. It was stressful at times. Servers were probably affected more because they make their living off of tips. When people don't come out to eat, they're they're not going to get their tips. My guys who cook, they work hourly. So, you know, as long as we have business coming in, they had a shift to work. So those are the guys that didn't get affected as much. I didn't necessarily increase any prices. What you would do is you change your portion size. When we price a menu, everything's done on portion size.